My name is Chad Griffiths, and I've been in St. John's for 13 years, but I grew up in Fox Harbour, Central Bay.
And I'm Andrea McGuire, and I've been in St. John's for, I think, 9 years, but I'm from Mount Pearl, Newfoundland. Yeah.
Cool. And I guess my first question is, did you grow up with mommering when you were a child?
Not at all. Not in any way.
Okay.
I know that my mom is from a place near Clarendon, Milton, and afterwards she was like, oh, well, we mummered. And she has stories about it too, but she never talked about it at all. So, yeah, definitely came into it later.
And when I was growing up, it was pretty rare. And I think even then, at that point, it was considered to be kind of a dying tradition or whatever. You had a scattered person come by. I remember one time, it was during Christmas, I didn't even know what a mummer was, and singular mummer came in, and I think my mom and dad had a suspicion who it was, but I had no idea. Probably wouldn't have known even if he had his mask off. And I remember him was going around being mischievous, and he took a Christmas present from underneath the tree, and I was really shocked by that. Someone might steal my Christmas gift. So I I put it in his overalls, and I think my mom got this. I was getting upset, and she kind of reassured me. It was just what mummers do, or whatever. He'll give it back. But that's like the one mummer that I remember as a child. But at that point, it was pretty frequent, at least. Yeah.
And so, when would have been the first time you actually mummered?
I suppose maybe about 5 years ago.
Yeah, I'd say together, with a bunch of friends.
And you went out together as for your first time out mummering?
Yeah, there were probably about 7 or 8 of us.
Okay.
So I guess that's often about the number. Sometimes, some years it's probably been about 15, but that's a little too many, really. But yeah.
And that's interesting. I actually would like to get back that later, like what works and what doesn't, sort of thing. Maybe things that you've learned from having done it.
Yeah.
But can you remember that first time and sort of tell me, sort of go from the start to the end, more or less, sort of how how you got a group together, what the preparations were involved, was it spontaneous, et cetera, and then how the night went for you, and then sort of the end.
I don't know.
Or do you remember it?
Well, there's certain factors that contribute to one not remembering very much while mummering. But I mean, maybe not the very first time, but I'd say we could probably talk about the first time of with Sam and everyone, because that's been kind of more of a tradition the last 3 or 4 years.
Do you think she wasn't there the first time?
I don't know. I'm not sure, but
we should get Shag here.
Yeah, he's our autobiographical memory bard. But no, I mean for the crowd that we've been going with fairly regularly. I wouldn't be able to tell you what sort of spurred it on. It'd probably be after the mummers parade. We were probably just sort of already geared up, and there might have been a few parties on the go, and we kind of rolled into it. But I think the preceding, or the years following that rather, were probably a bit more organized. It does take a certain amount of organization to get those people together like you would with anything, with 7 or 8 or 10 or 15 people. But I mean, it's like anything else. You find a date and you figure out what works for people, and I think we've often done it on either a Thursday or a Friday, something like that. It's not necessarily the weekend, because it's Christmas, so there will be a few parties on the go. And we'll often meet up at one house, usually your house. It's a big tickle trunk there, lots of costumes.
Yeah, I wonder if the first times it might have been after the mummers parade, and then you just keep hanging out as a mummer, and then maybe it was let's go, or I don't know. The origins are mysterious.
The origins are mysterious.
Yeah.
We do ourselves.
Yeah. But the last few years, it's very much kind of a planned thing, because everyone's really looking forward to it, and so we all have to make sure, book time off work, we're going on the 27th of December, and be there. And like, you'll rearrange your life so that you don't miss it, because it's the best night of the year. Like, yeah.
Hello, puppy.
And yeah, so we'll just have a few drinks beforehand and get all sorted out, and then in terms of planning, usually we'll have a few spots, you know, that you have sort of already planned out. You probably would have asked people if you'd probably ask people in advance if there's any parties on the go or dinner gatherings. It doesn't necessarily need to be a full-blown party. And we'll mix it in with people like that who we might know on the periphery, like people who aren't necessarily as close as to be a part of the troop itself, but other friends. And then the 15 or 10 or however many people we are, we'll probably hear about something else and be like, all right, let's check out this place. And then it might snowball from there. We might go to a party and we'll say, hey, who else should we hit up, right? And then going in between the spots now, if we get like brave, we might pop into another house, like just because the lights are on, there might be a few bodies in there, right?
And you might not even know who they are.
Yeah, we've gone to houses where we don't know them at all. Yeah, like a house across the street a few years ago, I remember, and then sometimes you'll see like a local celebrity or something, but it seems to go over well, and sometimes strangers give you shots. Beers, and
they know the code.
I think they like it.
Yeah.
Do you unmask when you go to strangers' homes?
Not always. Not regularly. I mean, you know, like if they seem really perturbed or suspicious, you might sort of break character a little bit, just to kind of assure them of it. But you know, I think they usually just are fine with going with it, and we've never really been. With a few minor exceptions, we've never really been turned away at the door where there's a whole party going on necessarily.
Yeah, I would say not a party. This year we were turned away from Trinity Pub. But last year they gave us all shots. But yeah, they locked the door.
Yeah.
Like, no. Yeah.
So I'm curious now, like, the traditional way of mummering, from what I know, is like you get a group of friends together, you go to houses that you know, you play the guessing game, you unveil, you have a little party in their house, and you go on to another house.
Yeah.
Which I'm assuming, and I have gone out with you, so I know that is kind of similar. Do you find that what you're doing is true to that sort of model of mummering, or do you feel that it's slightly different?
I'd say it's slightly different because, yeah, we don't always unmask. Maybe more often than not, we don't. And it's not necessarily a guessing game either. We don't really... yeah, that's not necessarily part of it. I think we just go in and carry on. And then, like, sometimes they will guess and they'll be like, yeah, it is me, you're right.
Yeah.
But,
it depends. It's different depending on whether it is someone who possibly we might know. In which case, we will stick around and be a bit more mischievous, maybe a bit more familiar, maybe, and even stick around afterward, like totally unmasked for a few drinks, right? And then if it's someone we don't know, or maybe like a commercial establishment, like we'll hit up Chess's, or one time we had quite the do at Winter Home when it was still a B&B, and
I was there for that.
You were there for that, and that'll be a bit more of a storming of a location, and just sort of get in and get out before we cause too much of a nuisance. So I think unlike, say, the prototypical rural Newfoundland thing where everyone knows each other anyway, and I think like mummering is kind of an excuse to visit those people who aren't part of your friend, extended family, like the people you'd normally swing in on. Then it's a bit different, right, than that. So I guess we've made changes that are necessary.
Yeah, or like some businesses, like we've gone into Tim Hortons, and you can tell they're kind of scared, like it's a bit scary. We don't do anything, but we're not like, it's me, don't worry. It's just like, we're mummers, and then leave probably in like 2 minutes.
Have you encountered people being scared in homes as well? What is the reception of people?
I think generally pretty positive.
Yeah, it's a scattered person who I would describe as ambivalent, but no one's too threatened, I don't think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The one time I went mummering in Fairyland, we went to houses and they knew that they had to guess these people, and it almost started happening instantly. Like, as soon as we came in, they were trying to figure out who it was. I found that when we did it here, when I was with you guys, people didn't always do the guessing game thing. So I'm just curious about that. Like, do people kind of know the game of mummering necessarily when you show up at their house?
I think probably not. Or maybe, yeah. I'd say maybe some people might.
Yeah, I'd say it's not as... you keep describing it as a game, right? Like, I don't think it's as, I don't know, codified or something in the minds of the people we've visited. And some people will sort of... They'll like have a realization, that's Chad, this, you know what I mean? They'll like pop it out, like there will be a moment, there'll be a moment between not knowing who I am and then they'll verbalize it, but it's not so much of a, you know, not exactly clue, you know.
I guess like in a small place, you do know everyone, where here it's like quite conceivable that you don't know the mummers. It's also highly likely that you might, because it's downtown St. John's, but you know, you don't really know.
Yeah.
It could be anyone. So, yeah. I remember we were in a bar, because we go to George Street too, and yeah, I was dancing around this guy who I did not know at all, and he, you know, he really wondered if I was somebody that he knew. And he was trying to guess. I was like, I have no concept of who you are, and who you know, or anything. I'm just a mummer in the night. Yeah.
Do you have any, over the last few years that you've been mummering, are there any stories or moments that really stand out for you as quite memorable?
I always think about, like, we went to, is it the curling club or on military there after a wrestling match? The CLB Armory. And there had just been a wrestling match, and we kind of mummered around the ring, like some people were cleaning up a bit, but then there was this man who I presume was a wrestler who had his shirt off, and he just kind of danced around with us, and that's just seared into my memory. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's lots of little things, like, stand out, like you mentioned earlier, the winter home, because we just kind of bombed into there. I don't know whose idea it was. But they had a big old kick of it. They also had this big spread of alcohol, and I think we took a proper chunk out of it. And I think by the time we had left, if not a bit before, I think our welcome had been a bit worn at that point. But initially, though, people were. I mean, it was like, you know, I think people were very cheerful and happy about it. People were dancing and were swinging people around, and it was quite the scene.
Yeah, I had, you know, that we were kind of storming into a luxurious affair, and none of us knew anyone. Like, that was a bit...
Yeah, a little trickstery. Yeah, a little trickstery, and another time we popped into some friends' homes, like someone I knew fairly well at least, and they were having a party there, a little small little gathering, and we came in, and we came and did our whole thing with the accordions and da-da-da, and, you know, really kind of blew a side out of her, and looked around, just sort of took a moment to step out of my glee and realize, like, no one was really participating or reacting, and it almost seemed like it was a funeral, right? And I didn't quite know what to do, so anyway, we got out of there later, but it turned out they just smoked like a big old joint, and they just weren't ready. They just weren't ready for that. So, and they apologized afterward for being so inhospitable, but it was just like it kind of upturned their expectations of what the night was going to be. So that was a little disarming at first. To be like, what, you know, like, are we actually? Because that moment kind of made me feel like, are we actually just nuisances? Like, are we just doing this for ourselves, and like there are victims? Because I think like mummering is an exchange. Like, we give you this unexpected time with dance and song, and you give us some booze and we move on, right? Yeah. And if we were violating that covenant, then like that would require a certain amount of soul searching, but no, they're just very, very high.
Sometimes people on George Street like treat you like you're a celebrity, like they want to take your photo, and usually it goes over really well there. Yeah, maybe it's a bit different because it's not anyone's home. Like it's not a violation of privacy. Yeah, yeah, and also I guess maybe you or maybe someone else often convinces the bouncer to let us go in without paying because. What do you say? Like, none of us have wallets. Or, we don't even have wallets. Just let the mummers in for a dance. Come on.
Yeah.
They let us, and it's really funny.
Yeah, no, everyone loves us. Like, the traditional spots eat it up with a spoon for the most part. And then sometimes we go to places that are a bit different. Like
last time we went clubbing, we went to Dusk.
Dusk.
Oh yeah, you were there.
That was hilarious.
And they actually, we were well received there.
Yeah.
It was just like those like kind of cool spots, like a martini bar where everyone's trying to seem cool. That it's like a little less received.
But it was like I'd never been in Dusk before, and I have no plans, But I got to experience a little bit of what a club like that was like as a mummer.
Yeah. You had a benefit of ever having to show your face there. It's good. Yeah, that's good.
So, for anyone who's never been a mummer, like, what does it feel like?
I find it very liberating.
Yeah?
Yeah, to be anonymous. Yeah, maybe that's one reason why I don't want to show my face. But yeah, like, I think I've seen little videos that people have taken too. And yeah, I think I moved different, like probably lots of people do. Like you just get kind of a new kind of movement as a mummer, and it's just really fun. I guess you try to be entertaining as well. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a transformational process to be sure. Like the obvious stuff, like the changing your shape and your gender presentation. All that stuff is something that I think people kind of really lean into when they're designing their costume, because you don't want to seem like yourself. Like the costume is be anything but yourself. Like that's kind of the costume and hide your identity, right?
Yeah.
So like that's a really fun aspect of it, and people like helping each other dress at the beginning and so on, and you kind of want to give yourself a little bit of time to kind of party together. To get a certain vibe going, get a few drinks, and like kind of set the tone, and then sort of take that and launch that out into the rest of the world, right? I think that's an important point.
Yeah, I always get the impression that time before you go mummery is actually pretty important.
Yeah.
The
last couple years, our friends' parents have really wanted us to come to a Christmas party. As our first house, like we would normally gather at like my house or someone else's house first anyways, and then they are just like, we'll pay for cabs, come out to the East End, we really want you to come to this party, there's tons of food, like they're just like super eager for us to come.
Yeah.
But it's so nice, and they're so nice.
And you go.
Yeah.
And because they don't really know you, I'm assuming you're not playing the guessing game so much.
No.
So what do you do?
Well, I know them because I've been friends with them for forever, so it will be like...
I guess they're starting to get to know us at this point.
Yeah.
Well, I think that would definitely fall into more, like, it's kind of a mix, that one, because, like, it's like, it is a familiar place that we've been essentially welcomed into, invited to, even, and, and they're ready for us,
Yeah.
But they, at the same time, like, they'll know maybe, Andrea and a few other people there, and that's about it. So, I don't know, we put on a bit of a song and dance, lots of the mummers that we troupe with are very musical, so we'll have guitars and accordions and what have you. So we'll put on a few songs and try to lead them in a chorus of one thing or another. And
they have a piano there, and
do.
last year we went with our friend's brother, who is like a really wonderful pianist, so he was playing, and then one of Sam's relatives got up and she was singing, like, she gave this amazing operatic performance for all of us. And anyways, that was a fun memory moment too.
Yeah. Yeah, the music is is a big part of the gift, right? Like that's the part of the exchange. I'm sure other people mummer without instruments per se, but I think there must always be like musical elements or.
But you guys all go out with instruments.
We do, yes. Yeah.
And there's also like Chad and Peter are quite good at making up songs off the top of their head. Yeah, other people will do that a bit too, so I think that's pretty fun for people.
Have you had any moments where like something spontaneously came out of you that you remember and that was perhaps related to the fact that you were wearing a disguise, or is that kind of just everyday life?
Well, yeah, like I think that it helps me feel more relaxed and spontaneous myself, and I'd probably say things and sing things that I might not otherwise. I know, like, Chad just makes up crazy songs all the time at any party, so...
It is different though as a mummer. It's just always the context is important.
Yeah.
I feel like I can be more of a trickster as a mummer. You know, I think that's an important role in a mummer troupe, is the person who just kind of takes it just slightly over, like just slightly over the edge, or just like kind of is always balancing on that edge of what's kind of acceptable and what's not. I think that like there's a certain, I don't know, that liminal deviance, you know, is kind of, I think it undercuts all mummering.
Can you remember any sort of trickery that you've done over the years, or something that you wouldn't normally do if you were walking in the doors, Chad Griffiths?
Oh, I mean, what was that time in Georgetown I chased someone into their house, and not even straight right up to their door, like they're getting out of their car or something like that.
Oh, I don't remember.
Remember that one? It was...
I do remember one of our friends kind of like chasing at a car in a somewhat menacing way this year past, so it was kind of like even though we were all just like, you're going too far. There's a bit of a line, so people don't think we're awful, but
so I mean, I imagine that memory and deviancy, they're probably in a disproportionate or indirect relationship. But no, I don't know. It's just, but regardless of any, I don't want to incriminate myself here.
Fair enough.
But I think it is an important element to it, even if it is uncomfortable for both the people inside and out of the troupe. You know.
When you get to a door and you're, wanting to get inside, you're obviously not going in as Chad Griffiths and Andrea McGuire, and I'm assuming everyone else isn't walking in as themselves. Right. Is there a certain... When you go in, do you sort of act the same way with each door? Do you have a certain thing, or is it... or like a repertoire, anything you fall back on, or,
I think, I guess probably there's always a song of some sort that begins pretty quickly. Yeah. That we would all join in on. Yeah. Different songs.
Usually you come in with music. So
you definitely fire up the accordions and the guitars before you knock on the door, maybe even just as you are, I think. I think that's important. I think that's important to sort of create that otherworldly quality. It's not every day that just music spontaneously bursts from outside your door,
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. Huh. And I wanted to go back to the costuming, disguising thing. Like, obviously every time's going to be different, but are there certain... What makes for a good mummer's disguise for you? What do you like to wear when you mummer?
I think I like to have something a bit gender bendy going on.
Yeah.
Yeah. But we have this. I don't normally go out and buy anything for it, so it's just kind of what's around. But at my house we do have a tickle trunk of costumes from various events and things. So it's normally just kind of a last minute, what can I do? And sometimes it works better than others. I definitely want to be well disguised. but it's kind of like sometimes it'll be a bit glittery, or you know, it'll be like, you know, we're towny mummers, you know. Yeah.
Yes, towny mummers.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the gender bending seems to, I think, impact on almost everyone in our troop. It seems like an unavoidable, quintessential part of it. There's also like kind of other practical considerations you should make. Like, it can get quite hot. The things about mummering is you're going from extreme temperatures, right? You're going from out in the you know, the street. You might be walking for 10 minutes between houses, and then you're in could be a, you know, wood stove fire. You know what I mean? It could be anything. You know, it could be quite hot in there. So, you know, something that's breathable. And you're not really dressing in layers. You're not taking anything off necessarily. Maybe like a shawl, if that. So something that's like breathable. So like a veil is better than, say, a mask for me, because you can get your drink up underneath it, and it also sort of airs it out a bit, right? And then if a veil isn't concealing enough, maybe you might wrap it up with a scarf, you know, and that'll kind of do both things. It'll conceal you and keep you warm. So there's practical considerations to be made. It's like, you know, what kind of footwear you're wearing as well is important. You still need to be getting around, but at the same time, like, you know, it should go with your outfits, and, you know, like, ideally. And, I don't know. I prefer like the sashy, kind of scarvy, ribbony kind of quality to it. Other people can take on different types of aesthetics, you know.
Yeah.
I like having my hands free.
Oh, yeah.
For a drink, and also because sometimes I take a melodica, so I like to play it a little bit sometimes without being encumbered by mittens and whatnot. Yeah. Yeah. But I guess, trying to get an outfit that's good on the road, like in the cold, but like you're not going to be like, oh, get this off of me when I get inside too much. So, yeah. Yeah.
Have you learned anything over the years of like things that just don't work, that are like, these are good tips for like how to mummer well? Are there things you learned that's like, this is not a good thing to be doing when you're out mummering?
That's not...
Maybe not.
I mean, it's all pretty good. I'd avoid things like masks, or you know, like people think that like a pillowcase with a few holes in it would do.
Yeah.
It'll get quite hot, and then like you can't quite drink out of it. So that's kind of maybe a lazy way of doing it. So I'd probably try to avoid that. You kind of do want to have some access to your face.
Yeah.
One way or the other.
I have. No, maybe this is a sensitive topic, but I have gone with a slightly different group of mummers before, and there's less. We had less music going on and less big personalities, and I felt a bit like, I don't know. I feel much better when those things are certainly present, I guess.
The bigness and the loudness.
Yeah. Because sometimes, like, I think we had one accordion and I was playing the melodica, and that was it. And, like, I think, you know, the more people who can sing a song and play guitar and dance around and, like, make up a song, the better. Yeah.
Right.
I think that's true.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, like, I do think of it as an exchange.
Yeah.
You know, you do need to be offering something. You are going to people's houses, and with the implicit understanding that you'd be provided alcohol.
Yes.
So I think that's kind of that's the bargain, right?
Yeah.
But at the same time, like, I guess in the past, probably, like, everyone mummered. And maybe it was more, like, probably less people mummered who, I don't know, would everyone have been playing music? I'm not sure. Like, maybe it was more about the guessing game and, yeah. But I guess it feels like our exchange is what we imagine to be entertaining for booze and, you know, indulging us.
How long are you in a home before you might remove your disguise, or if you even remove it at all?
Well, sometimes another thing to keep in mind is, like, sometimes you need to get out, and sometimes, like, I feel like just reading the room, like, some mummers might be too drunk to realize that, like, there might be some negative vibes going on, or that it's just, like, time to go. So knowing when to leave is a good mummer tip.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah. But yeah, I'd say like if you're just feeling like really comfortable, and probably it's around people you know very like really well, you might like take off your mask and just hang out.
Yeah, it would often be, not always, but there'd be one party, say, that we'd stick around at the longest, say, and then we might just demask and have maybe more than one drink, and then go on. Like Charlotte's this year would be an example of that, right?
Yeah.
We're there a bit longer than in the other places. So I think that at that point it's totally cool to, demask. But I think it's just like a regular kind of drive-by mummering that we do. Like we'll go in and we'll probably do one or two songs. If they don't give you a drink, at that point, after like the first or by the middle of the second song, and we just kind of take that as that they don't want us there, maybe, or or offer something like it's like some kind of thing, a bowl of chips or chocolates or anything like that, like just something to sort of signal welcoming. And if you don't get that, I think in the first one or two songs, then we'll probably just turn around and leave. Take that as a hint.
And it's never like they didn't do that. It's just like, okay, cool.
No, it's a part of the flow.
Yeah.
There's no bitterness involved. It's just kind of on to the next house. Just grateful that we had somewhere to pop in.
Yeah.
That they opened the doors at all, really.
Yeah.
Do you always travel on foot, or do you ever take a taxi or a car or anything in between places?
Well, only to go to the East End for our friends, like to the cab, which is pretty fun. Like the cab rides, like the drivers are usually pretty entertained, and I don't know. We were like, I remember I was kind of like playing the melodica in the cab, practicing my ditties or whatever.
I thought you were playing along the K-Rock there at some point.
Yeah.
But I think that's a bit of a warm-off, but it's kind of getting on with the cab drivers.
Yeah, they, like, you could tell it's a bit of a special moment, because it's also vans. Like, they bring vans, so there's, like, 6 mummers in back.
What's the time like between homes? What is
that
experience like?
It's still pretty crazy.
I just speak for myself, I guess, but I feel like it's more or less accurate, because, like, we'll often find ourselves walking down kind of smaller streets like Cabot Street or whatever anyway, right? So I feel like even if we're not in people's homes, we're being regarded by someone, we're being seen by someone looking out the window or what have you. So I still think, like, it's not a performance necessarily, like a completely outward thing. We're just enjoying it internally as well, but it's a bit of both. But I feel like we're still on.
Yeah, like often someone, like our friend Peter, will play, like people will still sing songs and we'll just be like dancing along. Especially early in the night. I think later in the night, because it's hard to keep up that level of energy for hours and hours, so I think later in the night, it's kind of like, okay, maybe mummers need a little time to, like, come back to themselves.
Yeah.
I mean, we're heading to George Street, we've got to be big there, let's take this time. But I think, like, earlier in the night, it's more just, like, constant party, whether you're in a house or not.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And at one point, a few minutes ago, one of you said something about being townie mummers. Mm-hmm. Do you think there's something unique about being a townie mummer versus a mummer?
Well, I guess I don't have experience with being a mummer out of town. I just suspect that there is something about it. Yeah, like...
I don't know. I mean, I've not really mummered out of town either, so... But maybe you just meant your costume was a bit more dashing than you'd probably...
Yeah, just like a bit more glamour than like you would have had in Outboard, Newfoundland, back in the day or something, It's not really necessarily going for a traditional aesthetic. It's just like, what ridiculous items do we have around? Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So is ridiculous part of the aesthetic?
I would say, yeah. Like, this year I wore as part of my outfit, I wore a costume for like a 2-headed giant in a play that our friend had sewn together out of like these old Living Planet shirts, and it was just this crazy item, which is just inherently ridiculous. Yeah. But I wore it as a mummer.
Yeah, I think there's a spectrum between the traditional, Christmas tree ornament mummer, and like maybe like the postmodern mummer, like Erin when she was wearing the garbage net on her head. It was beautiful. It was very beautiful, and it was kind of appropriate to the culture because obviously like St. John's is known for garbage nets because they keep the gulls away. But it was just balled up on her head in such a way where she could see quite clearly, but no one could see into it as well. And it was just giant, right? And it was just, I thought it was just, she nailed it. I thought it was like the perfect mix, you know, of that kind of more out there design and still kind of something that's anchored to something that's like quintessentially Newfoundland.
That is an amazing headpiece. I never thought about how great that would be, but that is awesome.
And it comes out of like it's you know the necessity, and you know it's just you're looking around, and like a lot of people already grabbed a lot of the good gear from the tickle trunk, and you're just looking around for anything, and you just find something, just, you know.
Yeah.
Huh.
It kind of works. Yeah.
Yeah. So I wonder if like some people might have more of a like. No, we've got to do the traditional. If we're mummering, we've got to do it right. We've got to have the right outfit or whatever.
I think it's like, I don't know. It's an interesting question. Leave this into the folklorists, but I mean, I wonder if there's a certain fetishization of what is traditional. Like, I can only imagine like the boys back, 60, 80 years ago were being around like, oh, we can't go out tonight because like I just used the last of my potato sacks, mending up this thing, other thing. Like, they'll just grab whatever they can and go with it, right? I think like, Michael Cromwell who said like Newfoundlanders have always been modernists. Like, we've always taken what we have at hand and make do with it, right? So I mean. Maybe there's a bit of that as well. Who's to say? I'm not a folklorist.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's the thing. I find that interesting. Like, I think it's very true that people just mummered here, and it wasn't anything. And how it is viewed today is really different, and how it's sort of become a symbol. And it's, I think that there's been some. I personally think there's probably been some shifts into what people think it is. And that there are these classic looks that, like the Christmas ornament style of mummer. But I think it's, do you have have you thought about mummering in the modern day? And do you have any thoughts on that?
Sure.
Yeah?
Well, I mean, I do think that the Mummers Parade has... would we mummer if not for the Mummers Parade? I'm not sure, because, I love the Mummers Parade, went every year, and first experienced this, it's so liberating to be a mummer feeling, and it's not really my mom told me the story about mummering, a couple of years ago. She was not sitting around talking about what it was like to mummer, because I think she wants to be a modern citizen of the world or whatever. I think the Mummers Parade has done a lot of stuff in terms of, there's other parades happening in other communities, and it's influencing us to go mummering, I think.
Why would people do it today? Or why do you do it?
It's the most fun ever. But it's also, I think living in St. John's is kind of an interesting place to do it, because people who live downtown, I think, often have the feeling like they know everyone, even if you don't, but there's still the feeling that you're kind of in a small place. So maybe that makes it feel a bit less dangerous than if you were to try and go mummering in Toronto or something. So it's urban mummering, but I feel like it works well in a small city.
Yeah.
I mean, why mummer? Because you can get away with it.
And there's something that's satisfying about getting away with something.
I think so. I think when people accept you into the door, there's probably a spectrum of obligation to sheer celebration, kind of between there. And but I think carrying it on, I think, is important, and not just for that sake. It's just. I don't know. It's just a lot of fun at the end of the day, I suppose. Yeah. But there is something that feels important, even if it's the singular most silly thing you could probably do.
I think just the fact that it's a lot of fun is reason enough.
Yeah.
You know? I also am sometimes curious to know, like, what part of a tradition stays and what part goes. And I don't actually really know. But yeah. I don't know. Is there anything do you think that do you have any other thoughts or stories of things about mummering that you haven't had a chance to say yet, or anything that you thought that would be worthwhile from your own experiences?
Sure way. I mean, that's more or less all there is to it. It's a simple little thing, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've never really thought about like carrying the mummering torch into the future sort of thing. Seems like that was sort of being gestured at there.
Yeah,
but,
maybe. I mean, yeah. I mean, why? Just I don't know. Why not? I think it's cool. Like I mean, you know, whatever. Like tradition is just kind of some sort of fetishization of what has happened before, and like no one was thinking about tradition. You know what I mean? The things that we talk about as traditional, people are less inclined and less caught up with them staying traditional. I think things often just sort of develop and merge and change based on the circumstances. I think Mummer's no different. You know, some parts of downtown St. John's, I think, allow like some of the more traditional elements to exist. You know, we can walk. You know, a half hour and hit up 4 or 5 different houses of our friends, like easy, right? Like, so that's gonna stay, you know, and until that changes, you know. And what's different? Well, you know, we don't know everyone, but we still kind of want to have that surprising element, so we'll bang into a few strangers' houses and get that. And I think that should sort of work its way into as well. And I think that there's something beautiful about that because it speaks to a certain base element of trust in a community when you can have that, right? And I think that's a defining quality of Newfoundland as well, at least one that I certainly enjoy, right?
Something I find interesting, having done this work for a while, people tell me that they like going to the Mummers Parade, for example, because you can't really go mummering in St. John's anymore. But you clearly do. So what are the conditions? I think some people don't think the conditions are right for mummering to happen. But like you said, there are conditions that do allow it because you do it and it works well for you. Like being able to walk between homes and that sort of thing.
I guess it's kind of like knowing the people you know, like if we weren't decently well social connected, like, you know, being aware of these like peripheral parties or like that's probably part of it, but yeah.
It can't happen without community, at least in like the more familiar forms, right? Like, yes, I guess theoretically someone could just bang out into like a bunch of random houses and they'd probably have a good time with that, and maybe some kind of tradition would revolve around that, who knows. But like I think with us, like it's anchored in the community, and then the sort of the stranger houses are kind of just a different, you know, they're like a supplementary or whatever. So I think you can do it. I think, you know, if you know a handful of people at Christmas time, you know they're partying, tell them, oh, sorry, I can't make it, or whatever, and then, you know, find some friends, and they'll make some friends right afterward, you know, and, like, get those friends together. Could be friends you play sports with, or any sort of, you know, any sort of affinity group where you're not normally together, and then you know, piece it together, and you'll figure out, okay, wow, there's actually 4 or 5 houses that we can hit up that night between a lot of us, and then, I mean, that is productive almost, right? Like, there's a certain social productivity to that. People are getting to meet each other. You're getting to see other parts of your friend's house or your friend's community besides the book club or whatever, you know? And maybe there could be something like, just, like pro-social about that, which is kind of in beautiful juxtaposition to the typical deviance that mummering is afforded. But,
I think people can do it. They just need to give it a shot. Yeah.
Do you think, like, I've chatted with people who now they'll go to visit a house, and then whoever that host is, they will, on behalf of the mummers, call up the next house as this sort of like, there's mummers coming, and you know them, and there's this, and in that situation, there was this, I think the talk was about the fear of letting people in now, and that they figured out a way to do it, so that you still could be anonymous, but also alleviate anyone's fear about that group of people. But I don't know, do you ever let anyone know in advance that there might be mummers coming, or is it just like completely by surprise?
I don't know if anyone might amongst us. Like, for example, I wonder if Erin lets her people
Maybe
know.
tips the hat a bit.
But, yeah, maybe not. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's the secrecy is important.
Like that's sort of what you just described. If that works for people, that's cool.
Absolutely.
But it also like seems a bit overly cautious to me. Like,
If it works, it works. If that's like the level of trust that whatever. If it works, it works. Period.
Yeah.
And hopefully it does, because then that means it can be more mumming and mummering can be lots of different things. Everyone, like all the traditions or whatever we've followed through with over the years, like they're kind of just our traditions and kind of informed by other things and whatever. But if people are doing it differently somewhere else, then go mad. Like, yeah, that's a cool idea. It might be a good bridge even to establishing mummering as a bit more of something you can trust, right?
Yeah.
But probably, like most people are more fearful than us. Yeah. So they might have different norms or like I don't know. I guess lots of us have like hitchhiked before or whatever, would like take certain risks that maybe other people wouldn't take. So
your social circles open more open than maybe others. Huh. Cool. I think that's everything that I can think of that I wanted to ask. Oh, I did think of one other thing. Does technology play a role in mummering?
I think I often don't take my phone, but I know, like, I kind of regretted that last time, because, like, I have some friends will film, like, certain parts, and that can be really hilarious to look back on afterwards. But, otherwise, it could be useful if you lose track of each other. But it's not really like a big find
number app.
Like one friend I think posted a couple of videos or like one or two people, but I think for the most part it doesn't make like a social media splash. But I think that someone told me in years past that like random people had posted photos of us like at O'Reilly's or something.
The very last thing I wanted to ask is, and this is sort of like a pontification sort of thing. Do you think there's a future for mummering?
I hope so.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
I think, there's certainly people who I think would enjoy doing it and could do it here and around the Bay as well. So I hope they do, because it's a lot of fun.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think it'll ever go away completely. If anything, I think it's on the rise, largely in part to the Mummers Festival and like giving people a chance to, it's like a gateway activity, the Mummers Festival. You can go around, you can bring your kids, bring your dogs, dress up, and then all of a sudden it's like, well, what's the next step? It's like, let's bang on some doors, take this on the road. So
yeah, I guess, is it something that you could encourage during the Mummers Festival, or is it a bit too
to go mummering?
Yeah.
Well, that's why we're doing it anyways. It's the hope that people would actually just, like you said, it's like the gateway to having a taste of something. Maybe a lot of people, I know within our social circles, we're quite used to being ridiculous and also wearing disguise and experiencing those things. But a lot of people, I don't think, do that, and I see it as the gateway to perhaps actually go out and do it. So we don't actually explicitly say that, but I think that was the point, was to get people encouraged to go do it.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, I succeeded.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thanks, Ryan.
That's great.